Hey, this is Teresa Matsura, and you're listening to Uncanny Japan. Today, I want to talk about cats. Not all cats, special cats. Cats that have supernatural powers or can transform into other things. Even cats that practice necromancy, because that was a thing that happened back in the day. Keep listening. Would you like to explore the stranger, more obscure corners of Japanese culture? Dig a little deeper into superstitions, curious customs, and all those mysterious creatures that inhabit the land? If so, then this is the podcast for you. Uncanny Japan is where I, author Teresa Matsura, share all the fascinating tidbits I unearth while doing research for my writing. From the bizarre to the ghastly, and everything in between. I hope you enjoy the show. So there are two reasons I'm doing an episode on cats. First is because I was sketching various ideas for last month's postcard for upper-tiered patrons, and I looked down and saw that I'd sketched a wigged-out-looking, two-tailed cat, a Nekomata, one of my favorites. Also, one of the first short stories I ever got published was about a Nekomata, so there's a warm, fuzzy, purring place in my heart for them. And the second reason is because I'm still following all the news I can that's coming out of Ukraine, and I noticed a lot of photos of people with their pets, their dogs, and their cats, too. Last episode was about the nine-tailed fox escaping, and over on Patreon, I just read Lafcadio Hearn's essay, Ululation, which is about his thoughts on a very strange dog that he knew, but it howled in the most eerie way at night. So I have covered my canine bases for the time being. Now for felines. You might have heard of a bakeneko. Bakeru means to change or transform. Think of the word obake, a thing that changes, or a ghost. Neko, of course, means cat. So a bakeneko is a cat that changes or can transform into something else. Sometimes people. A word you might not know, however, is kaibyo. The kai is the same as in yokai, and byo is not disease. It means cat, so a supernatural cat. A bakeneko is a kind of kaibyo. Another type of kaibyo is the one I mentioned just a few seconds ago, the Nekomata. Also a yokai cat that does strange things. I poked around for as long as I could to find the exact difference between a bakeneko and a Nekomata, and there are some theories, but because of their yokai nature, their long history, and that they are found all over Japan, there's a lot of overlap. In general, I read that one way you can tell them apart is that a bakeneko has one tail, a Nekomata has two. Also, that a bakeneko is a cat that has died an unfortunate death, perhaps at the hands of a human, and turns into a mischievous yokai, while a Nekomata is a cat that lives a very long life and turns into one. Although there are a variety of forest cats that are labeled Nekomata too, a different species, I presume. I'm going to talk mostly about the Nekomata today because my wee little rescue cat, Soda, was one. No, seriously, she did strange things and she had a two-pronged tail. Soda was actually born with a tail that twisted and curled at the end. It was fuzzy, as tails are, and the kink was very tight, so that she really looked like she had a forked tail. She could also do things like open any door in the house, no matter how cleverly you fixed it so that she couldn't, which I'm sure a lot of cat owners and cat lovers will say that their cat can do too. But she did this other thing. The cats, her and her brother Whiskey, slept downstairs in the living dining kitchen. We'd keep the doors all closed so they didn't wake us up at 4 or 5 a.m. Once we got the dog, Chachamaru, our beagle, He had his own little place down there. But Soda wasn't into that at all, at least not at first. So she'd open the door in the middle of the night, let him out, and then somehow close the door. So he couldn't get back in and bother her or her brother, Whiskey. In the middle of the night, I could hear her jumping to open the door, then hear the tick-tick-tick of doggy paws on hardwood floor. And when I went to check, there would be Cha-Cha wandering around in the dark, but the living room door was closed. When I opened it, Soda and Whiskey were just hanging out on the sofa. We always called her our little Nekomata. She also lived to be 5 months shy of 20 years old, which is definitely long enough to make the change. Oh, and once she spoke. I swear she did. No one believes me. This is such a true story. She was still a kitten and very vocal. And I used to talk to her all the time by saying, "Julian's home. Where's Julian?" So that she knew my son's name, and whenever I mentioned him, she would know that that's who I was talking about. Then one day we were sitting on the stairs playing with a toy mouse or something, and I'm not kidding you. Julian came home from school, and Soda looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Julian." Okay, it was a soft J. More like Mulian. But it was there, and she never did it again, because I think I scared the crap out of her when I picked her up and I started screaming, "She spoke, she spoke, she said your name," and ran downstairs. But anyway, she did talk once. Definitely a Nekomata. Okay, back to the topic. As I just mentioned, there are 2 kinds of Nekomata. One that lives in forests and mountains and seems to do bad things. And another that is just a normal house cat that grows very old and transforms into one of these feline beasties. If you're wondering how long it takes for your cat to transform into a Nekomata, well, that changes depending on who you ask. But a rough estimate is anywhere between 7 and 20 years. 7 years was a long time for a cat to live back in the day. So anything beyond that was otherworldly. The first time a Nekomata was ever written about was back in 1233 by a man named Fujiwara no Teika. This guy wrote about all kinds of things in his journal that he kept for 56 years, a journal that he named Meigetsuki. You gotta love a man who names his journal. These days it's viewed as a very important document to peek into life back in the day, as he covered politics, literary events, astronomical happenings, and once, even a Nekomata. He wrote that from Nara came a beastly creature with cat-like eyes, a dog-like body, and it killed and ate 7 or 8 people in one night. He didn't say exactly that it was a yokai, or what it was, but he did give it a name, a Nekomata. So what does a Nekomata look like? Well, they could look just like an ordinary cat, although some accounts have them being much bigger, as big as a lion even, a little shy of 3 meters in length. I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm guessing that's one of the mountain ones. Somewhere along the way came a scholar named Arai Hakuseki, who was the one who made the brilliant proclamation, "Old cats become Nekomata." So there you have it. And they also have 2 tails. Okay, now that you know what one looks like, and how age seems to turn them into this supernatural being, what do? Well, they dance around for one. It's believed that Nekomata tie a tenugui cloth around their heads, stand on their hind legs, and dance, dance, dance. They like to do this by your pillow when you're sleeping at night, too. They can also talk. There is an account of one in 1683 that lived at a temple and was often seen chatting up the other cats in the neighborhood. A little later, someone spotted it as a Nekomata on a roof. It lost its footing and fell, calling out the Buddha's name as it did. I just love that image so much. Some of these creatures, and again this is the blurry line between Bakeneko and Nekomata, can transform into people, surely to play tricks and cause trouble. But the fun doesn't stop there. Another delight these furry felines can do is necromancy. This might be due to their fancy dance moves, twisting their little paws around, flipping their tails. Whatever it is, they can either cause a dead person to stand up and dance, or actually bring someone who has passed away back to life. But there's one thing you have to remember about old Japan. People didn't eat as well as they do now. Meat wasn't exactly easy to come by, and if you did have some, you most certainly ate it yourself and you didn't feed it to your cat. The problem with that is cats are genuine carnivores. They need to eat meat. Another thing to note is that old Japanese andon lanterns were often filled with fish oil. Fish oil, says the cat. So can you imagine, curled up in your futon in your tatami-matted room, dozing? It's late and your lamp is still lit. The light is flickering against the paper shoji windows. You hear something, and you open your eyes, and there, standing on its hind legs, is your cat, lapping up the oil in the lamp. Long shadow thrown against the wall. And because of the licking going on, the flame is jumpy, so it looks like your cat is dancing. Now, I think that image is quite cute. But back in the day, especially around the Edo era, when artists were creating images of Nekomata and Bakeneko, and storytellers were telling stories about them, they were a much more feared creature. They even had a dreadful disease called the Nekomata byo, or Nekomata disease, although this just might have been rabies, which would make sense. Okay, now I'm going to answer the question you're all asking yourself. Is my cat a Nekomata? And how can I tell? Well, let me give you the checklist of 6 things that was used to tell if your little fur buddy was actually a yokai in disguise. Number 1. When it's dark, pet your cat the wrong way against the lie of the fur. And if its skin glows, you've got yourself a Nekomata. If it doesn't glow, you've got yourself an angry cat. Number 2. If you find your cat drinking the oil from your oil lanterns, very possibly a Nekomata. Number 3. If you notice that your cat's tail has gotten longer, moves like a snake, and gives you the creeps when you look at it, Nekomata. Number 4. If you find your cat wanting to be around stinky things, especially if it's fond of cuddling up with dead people, Nekomata. Can I remind you the thing about cats needing to eat protein and dead bodies being protein that doesn't run away? And how Nekomata are often associated with corpses? I'll let you do the math. Number 5. If your cat's tail becomes 2 tails, that's a telltale sign right there. Nekomata. And finally, number 6. If, when no one is around, your cat starts fires in the hearth, or just starts fires in general, it too is most likely a Nekomata. So there you go. Before I go, let me give you a recipe for Nekomama, or homemade cat food. I learned this from my mother-in-law, and while she said this is what she used to feed her cat, people eat it now kind of as a light and easy meal. Basically, it's rice that has either been sprinkled with miso soup or shaved bonito flakes, katsuobushi. Sometimes, somewhere in Japan, I've never seen them, but I did just read about them, you can find sushi rolls that have katsuobushi in them, the dried bonito shavings, and they're called cat rolls, nekomaki. Keep in mind that no matter how delicious it is, pouring miso soup on your rice, as far as I've experienced around here, is kind of uncouth. It's not a very polite way to eat. But back in the day, when people were very poor and very hungry, and rice tended to get hard and you needed to soften it up to eat, I think it was tolerated, and I'm sure it was delicious too. Anything that didn't make it into today's episode, like the cool ukiyo-e I found, I'll put on Patreon for the patrons. I think I'm going to start doing that. All the odds and ends that don't make it into the actual show, I'm just going to stick over there. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting the show, telling your friends. Thank you, patrons, for really supporting the show. And I will talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye. You've reached the end of the show, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate you listening and supporting us. Any subscribing, reviewing, and gushing to your friends, family, even random strangers really does help keep us going. If you have the means and you want to help a little more and get a little more, we are making extra content over on Patreon, all for only $5 a month. Or if you like to read horror, you might be interested in my Bram Stoker-nominated short story collection, The Carp-Faced Boy and Other Tales. 本当にありがとうございます. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you real soon.